I'm Taylor. I'm 24. At the time this started, I was 22, fresh out of college with a graphic design degree and almost no savings. I got a job offer, not great pay, but enough to feel like I was finally starting my life. The problem was housing. Rent in the city was brutal, and my student loans were just kicking in. I tried Craigslist, roommate groups, the usual, but nothing felt right. That's when Eric, a guy I knew from college, posted that his aunt was looking for someone to rent a spare room in her house. Said it was in a quiet part of town, big place, private room and bath, decent rent. I didn't even think twice. I texted Eric, and 2 days later, I was standing outside this beautiful two-story house with ivy on the porch columns and wind chimes that didn't even sound annoying, just soft, like something you'd hear on a meditation app. Her name was Lana. She was Eric's aunt, but not in the way you picture someone's aunt. She was 44, maybe 45, but you'd never guess it. Toned, poised, always put together in that way that felt effortless. She had this mix of elegance and edge, like she'd grown up in old money but rebelled in the right ways. Blonde hair always loose and wavy, eyes the color of overcast skies, voice low and warm like she always knew something you didn't. When she opened the door that first day, she smiled and said, "You must be Tyler," and just like that, I forgot whatever polite greeting I'd rehearsed in the car. I stammered something stupid like, "Yeah, thanks for having me," and she laughed, told me to come in, asked if I took coffee with milk or just black. The room was bigger than I expected. Clean, bright, with a view of the backyard. The walls were pale gray, and there was a bookshelf already half full, some novels, some travel guides. She'd even left fresh towels on the bed. "I figured you probably packed in a rush," she said, and smiled again. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that small bit of care was what made me stay. The first few weeks were normal. I mostly kept to myself. Got used to the sounds of the house, the way the floor creaked near the stairs, the soft classical music she played in the mornings, her voice when she was on the phone calm, clear, always just loud enough to hear but never quite enough to make out the words. We were polite with each other. She'd ask how my day was. I'd ask if she needed help with the groceries. Just enough to feel friendly. Nothing more. But things started to shift around the third week. One Saturday, she knocked on my door and asked if I could help move some boxes in from the garage. I said sure, and when I got down there, she was wearing an old band tee and yoga pants. Nothing scandalous. But she was barefoot, and her hair was a mess, and she looked, I don't know, real, I guess. Not polished. And that's when something changed in my chest. She caught me looking and raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked, half smiling. "Nothing," I said, way too quickly. But she held the look for a second longer than she needed to. Not flirtatious, not yet. Just knowing. Later that evening, she made dinner for both of us. Said it was no big deal, just felt like cooking something. We ate at the kitchen island. Talked about nothing. Weather, my job, her plants. But I remember how she kept glancing over at me when I spoke. Like she was studying me. Not in a judgmental way, more like she was trying to place me. After that, it became a rhythm. Shared dinners once or twice a week. Casual conversations in the hallway that lingered just a little too long. Her leaning against the doorframe when she talked to me. Me catching her humming while she poured wine at night. And I started noticing things. The way her hand would brush mine when we passed plates. How she'd stand just a little too close when we were in the kitchen together. How she once touched my shoulder when I made her laugh, and didn't pull away right away. I'd lie in bed at night trying to convince myself I was imagining it. That this wasn't any. But I'd wake up early just to catch glimpses of her in the morning, her robe tied loose, coffee in hand, looking out the back window like the whole world was on pause. There was something in the air between us, something quiet but persistent. Not loud, not obvious, but undeniable. And I couldn't stop thinking about it, even when I knew I should. There was this Tuesday night I still can't forget. She had friends over, just two women, both her age, dressed in sleek business casual, laughing and sipping wine in the living room. I came home late from work, tried to slip past without interrupting, but Lana called out my name. "Tyler, come say hello." I didn't want to. I was sweaty, still in my work clothes, mentally drained. But I couldn't ignore her voice. When I stepped into the room, she was sitting with one leg tucked under her on the couch, wine glass balanced in her hand. She looked over and smiled, slow, easy, like I was someone she'd been waiting to see. "This is my tenant/resident tech support," she said with a little smirk, introducing me. I shook hands, made polite conversation, laugh when I was supposed to. But I felt her watching me the whole time, while I talked, while I excused myself. I caught her looking as I walked up the stairs. The next morning, she found me in the kitchen making toast. Her friends were gone. "You clean up well," she said, eyes scanning me with a mix of amusement and something else I didn't know how to name. "They thought you were cute." I probably turned red. I laughed it off, muttered something like, "Well, glad I made a good impression." She didn't say anything back, just looked at me a second too long and left the room. That kind of moment started happening more often. The first time I really felt it, the shift, was late one night when we both ended up in the kitchen again. She couldn't sleep. Neither could I. She was wearing a thin cardigan over her tank top, pajama pants, barefoot again. I remember how she leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and said, "Do you ever just feel stuck?" And I did. So I said, yeah. We stood there talking for almost an hour. Not about anything deep, just memories, music we liked, what scared us growing up. Her voice got softer the longer we talked. She moved closer without realizing it. Or maybe she did. At one point, she touched my forearm. Not like it meant anything, but I felt it. There was silence after that. "I should sleep," she whispered. "Long day tomorrow." "Yeah," I said, not moving. But neither of us turned away for a while. And in that pause, in that breathless space, something hung in the air. Something just waiting to fall. It didn't happen that night, but something was unraveling. One weekend, Eric, her nephew, my friend, came over for lunch. Lana was different with him around. Brighter, more guarded. She made jokes, asked how his job was going, played the perfect aunt. I sat there feeling like a ghost with a secret. At one point, she brought out coffee and gently placed my mug a little closer than it needed to be. Just a small thing. But I noticed. She didn't look at me when she did it. And I couldn't stop thinking about the way her fingers brushed the table, right next to mine. After Eric left, I lingered in the kitchen. She stood by the sink, back to me. "Everything okay?" I asked. She turned slowly. Her face was unreadable. "I don't know," she said. "Some days I feel like I've made peace with things. Other days." She trailed off, then forced a smile. "You shouldn't worry about me." But I did. And the worst part? I liked worrying about her. I liked wondering what she was thinking when she looked out the window like that. I liked that she shared those quiet, sad pieces of herself with me. It made everything feel deeper. That same night, I woke up to use the bathroom and found the hallway light still on. Her door was open just a crack, soft golden light spilling out onto the floor. I stopped in front of it, not sure why. Maybe I thought she'd call out again. Maybe I thought she was awake. She was. She stepped into the hall just as I turned to leave. She was wearing a soft robe, hair down, eyes tired but sharp. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said. "You didn't," I replied, voice lower than usual. We stood there in that narrow hallway, her doorway behind her, my bare feet cold on the hardwood. "You should get some sleep," she said, but didn't move. "You too." Still, we stayed like that, just breathing in the same space. Something heavy between us. She touched my hand, just for a moment, and then she turned, stepped back into her room, and shut the door quietly behind her. I lay awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling. Because that wasn't just a moment. That was the beginning of something neither of us could take back. It was a Friday. I'd been up late finishing a freelance logo project on my laptop in the guest room. Lana knocked softly around 11, which was unusual. We usually gave each other space at night. I got up, opened the door, and there she was, hair tucked behind one ear, sweater hanging loose off one shoulder, holding a small plate. "I made brownies," she said, almost too casual. I blinked, caught off guard. "No." She smiled. "I couldn't sleep. Thought you might still be working." I stepped back and let her in. We sat cross-legged on the floor of my room like we were teenagers. She handed me a brownie and didn't leave after. Instead, she looked around, said, "You've made this space yours," then leaned against the bed frame with her legs stretched out. I don't remember what we talked about. Something about movies. Something about regrets. I do remember how the air started to feel thick. Her bare foot brushed mine under the blanket I'd draped over my lap. She didn't pull back. "Sorry," she said quietly. "It's okay," I replied, and I meant it. We fell silent again. The kind that stretches and folds over itself until you either say something or break it with action. "You're too young for me," she said suddenly, eyes still on the far wall. I didn't know what to say. I waited. Then, almost in a whisper, she added, "But you see me." That cracked something open in me. Without thinking, I reached for her hand. I didn't even realize I'd done it until our fingers were already tangled. She looked at me then, really looked, and that wall she'd been holding up just crumbled. She leaned in first, slowly, like she was waiting for me to back away. I didn't. Our lips touched, soft at first, barely there. A test. Then again, slower. Warmer. Real. We pulled apart, breathing hard like we'd run for miles. Neither of us said anything. Her hand stayed in mine. I should go, she murmured. Okay, I said, not letting go. She looked at me again, and there was this flicker in her eyes, fear and want and something like relief. She stood. I stood with her. And then, without another word, she hugged me. It wasn't brief. She held on for a long time, head against my shoulder, her body so close I could feel the rise and fall of her breath. Then she pulled away, brushed my cheek with her fingers, and walked out. Quiet. Slow. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood in the middle of the room for minutes after, the taste of her kiss still warm in my mouth, my skin tingling from every place we touched. That night, sleep came in strange, broken waves. The next morning, things weren't weird. That surprised me more than anything. She poured coffee like usual, asked about my project like usual. But there was a softness now, a tenderness under her words. When our eyes met, it stayed longer. When I passed her a mug, our fingers touched, and neither of us pulled away. We didn't talk about the kiss. We didn't need to. 2 nights later, it happened again. It was raining. I'd come downstairs to close the back door. She was already there, standing at the window, watching the trees sway. You like the rain? I asked. It makes me feel like I'm not the only one who can't hold it all in. I didn't answer. I stepped beside her. We stood in silence. Then she turned toward me. And just like that, we were kissing again. Deeper this time. Hungrier. Her hands in my hair. Mine at her waist. The sound of rain thick against the windows. We didn't cross every line that night. But we came close. Close enough to know this wasn't just some isolated mistake. Close enough that when she finally whispered, "This can't happen again," I nodded. And then, the next week, it happened again. And again. Each time we swore it would be the last. Each time we meant it. Each time, we broke that promise. Because what lived between us wasn't just want. It was something quieter. Stronger. Something we didn't know how to name. And even if we had, I think we were both too scared to say it out loud. After that, everything changed. Not all at once. There was no dramatic shift. But in the quiet, gradual way a room gets darker without you realizing the sun has set. We didn't talk about what we were doing. We didn't give it a name. But we built something, piece by piece, in the silence between what we felt and what we couldn't admit. It started with moments. Sunday evenings after she finished grading papers at the dining table. I'd walk in, she'd look up, and we'd just know. A pause. A breath. Then we'd find ourselves on the couch, tucked into the corner, her hand in mine under the blanket. We'd talk about anything but us. Sometimes, not at all. I started learning her routines. When she liked her tea. How she always opened the windows after rain. The old records she played when she cleaned the house. She hummed to them, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, completely unaware I was watching her from the stairs. Sometimes she'd text me short, vague messages that carried everything. Quiet morning. Want to share it? Backyard's nice right now. Just me out here. Lock the side door. You can still come in. When I responded, it was always with action, not words. I'd show up, coffee in hand, or climb out through my bedroom window and slip into the kitchen from the garden, where she'd be waiting, hair pulled up, sleeves pushed back, candle flickering on the counter. We were careful, almost paranoid. If Eric texted or visited, everything snapped back to normal, polite, casual, distanced. She'd greet me with a wave instead of a smile. I'd keep my door half closed, just enough to make it clear nothing was going on. But when the house was empty, we let the truth stretch out between us. She kissed me in hallways, touched my hand when passing a dish, brushed her fingers through my hair as I sat on the floor beside her while she read. And in those moments, I felt like I was living in the only real part of the world. But there were cracks. Some nights she'd go quiet. She'd sit at the edge of the bed with the lights off, staring into the dark like she was listening to a conversation I couldn't hear. "I'm not supposed to want this," she said once. "I know," I said, not sure if I was agreeing or apologizing. "My sister's been calling me more," she added. "She keeps asking if I've met someone. I can't even look her in the eye through the phone." I didn't know what to say to that. Because I wasn't someone, not in the way she meant. I was 24. A tenant. Her nephew's friend. the person sleeping in her guest room. And she had a life full of history and decisions and a past that stretched longer than mine had even existed. Sometimes I caught her watching herself in the hallway mirror after we kissed, like she didn't recognize her reflection, or maybe like she was trying to convince herself it was still hers. I started to feel the weight of it too. Every time I heard her upstairs talking to a friend, or when she smiled at the neighbor in the driveway, I wondered what we looked like from the outside. Two strangers. Or worse, nothing at all. But I kept going back. Because when we were alone, it wasn't complicated. She'd run her fingers over my jawline and whisper that I felt like a second chance. I'd pull her close and tell her I'd never felt so seen. And maybe we were both lying to ourselves. Maybe we both knew this wasn't going to last. But at night, in the quiet hum of her room, with the curtains drawn and the world on mute, we forgot everything. We forgot what we were risking. We forgot that time wasn't on our side. We forgot what was waiting for us on the other side of sunrise. Because in those hours, those stolen, flickering hours, we belonged to nobody but each other. It started unraveling slowly, like fabric worn too thin, pulling apart at the seams. She changed first. Not in an obvious way. She still smiled when I walked into the room. Still made coffee exactly how I liked it. Still kissed me when the house was quiet. But there was a distance in her eyes, like she was watching something fade from the edge of a dream. One night, we sat on the back porch with the lights off. The moon was low, and the trees were swaying so quietly it almost felt rehearsed. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, sweater wrapped tight around her arms. I handed her a blanket, but she didn't take it. Instead, she said, "What would you do if someone found out?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out at the garden instead, where the little solar lights blinked like dying fireflies. "I guess I'd deal with it," I said. She nodded. "You'd survive it. You have time to make mistakes." She didn't say it like she was blaming me. Just a fact. "But I wouldn't survive it the same way," she added. I looked at her, and something in my chest cracked open. "I never meant for it to get this far," she whispered. I wanted to say, "Me neither," but it would have been a lie. Because I had meant for it. I wanted it to keep going. I wanted more nights, more mornings, more of her brushing her hand along my back just before falling asleep. I wanted the part of her no one else got to see. The part she only showed me. But I didn't say that either. I just reached for her hand, and she let me hold it for a little while. The next week was quieter. Fewer texts. More distance. Conversations felt careful, edited. She avoided the kitchen when I was in it. Then one night, I came home to find a note on the hallway table. "Tyler, I'm with a friend tonight. Don't wait up. Please remember to lock the back door. L." I stared at the note for a long time. It wasn't about the friend. It was about what wasn't being said. 2 days later, I found her sitting at the dining table with a glass of wine and a pile of open mail. She didn't look up when I walked in. I sat down across from her. "I miss you," I said quietly. She looked at me then, eyes tired. "I miss me too," she replied. We didn't touch. Didn't speak for a minute. Then she said it. "I think we have to stop." Just like that. No build-up. No slow lead-in. Just the truth, blunt and gentle all at once. I stared at the wood grain on the table. Counted the little scratches and watermarks. Tried to focus on anything but the feeling in my chest. "I know," I said. "I felt it coming." She reached across the table, touched my fingers lightly. Her hand was shaking. "I'm not ashamed," she said. "But I can't keep living in two worlds." I nodded. My throat felt tight. "I thought maybe it could stay just ours," I said. "But I guess secrets don't stay small forever." She smiled faintly, a little broken. "You were never small to me." That hit harder than I expected. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We just sat there, letting the silence fill in everything we didn't have the courage to say. Eventually, she stood, walked around the table, and hugged me. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't desperate. It was the kind of hug you give when you know it's the last one. "I don't regret it," she whispered against my shoulder. "Me neither." When she pulled away, she kissed my cheek, so gently it barely felt like a kiss at all. "Thank you for letting me be someone else for a while," she said. "You were someone to me," I replied. "Not someone else." She smiled through the ache in her eyes. "Go live your life, Tyler. You have so much of it left." I didn't say goodbye. I just walked upstairs, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed with the lights off for hours. And in the dark, I let it settle in. That she was gone, and that whatever we were was over. I moved out 2 weeks later. I told her I'd found a place closer to work, that it would cut my commute in half. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. She offered to help me pack, but I said no. Not because I didn't want her help, but because I knew I couldn't handle those small, quiet goodbyes. Every book pulled from the shelf, every item folded and placed in a box, every shared object turned solitary again. The night before I left, she slipped an envelope under my door. Inside was a handwritten note and a small silver key. In case you ever forget what we were. I kept the key. I still have it. Don't know why. I moved into a studio apartment downtown. It was loud, always smelled faintly like burnt toast, and my upstairs neighbor played bass at 2 a.m. But it was mine. No garden, no warm lighting, no quiet woman humming jazz in the kitchen. Just me, my books, and silence. I tried to fill the void with work. Took on every project I could. I stayed up late, woke early, pushed through coffee-fueled days that blurred together. I told myself it was just a phase, that the ache would dull eventually, that missing her would become muscle memory, something you only notice when it flares. But it lingered. Certain things brought her back. Grapefruit-scented soap, cello music, the sight of someone brushing hair from their eyes the same way she did. Even walking past the tea aisle made my throat tighten. I found myself avoiding her street entirely, even though it added 10 minutes to my route. Eric reached out once. Asked how I was settling in. I said good. He mentioned his aunt in passing, how she'd been traveling more lately, spending weekends upstate. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded like that made sense. We never spoke again, Lana and I. No calls. No texts. Not even a "hope you're well" sent in the middle of a weak moment. It was like we'd both agreed, silently, that breaking contact was the only way to preserve what we had. Because if we tried to drag it forward, to stretch it into something ordinary, it would have cracked, turned into resentment, guilt, a reminder of what we couldn't keep. So I let it sit in the past, our little corner of time, untouched. Months passed. A full year, maybe more. I dated. A little. Nothing serious. I'd sit across from women in coffee shops, smiling politely, nodding at their stories. But none of them saw me the way she had. Not because they weren't kind or smart or interesting, but because they hadn't watched me fall apart and stayed. They hadn't made tea at 2 a.m. or whispered things in the dark when the rest of the world didn't exist. I tried to move on. I really did. And then, last week, it happened. I was walking through the farmer's market, half distracted, holding a bag of fresh basil and a loaf of overpriced bread, when I saw her. At first, I wasn't sure. She had her back to me, hair pulled into a low bun, wearing a soft green jacket I didn't recognize. But then she turned. Lana. She hadn't seen me yet. She was inspecting peaches at a stall, her face calm. A little older maybe, a little thinner. But still her. Still Lana. My heart stuttered. I froze. She looked up. And just like that, our eyes met. Her expression changed, not shocked, not even surprised. Just full. Like a drawer you forgot you stuffed with memories, now pulled wide open. We didn't speak. Not then. She gave a small smile. I nodded. Then she looked back down at the peaches. And I walked on, my bag of basil swinging at my side, my chest heavy with everything we didn't say. That night, I found the silver key again. Still in the same drawer, tucked between receipts and old charger cables. I held it in my hand for a long time. I don't know what to do about this, but my heart is aching again. A few days passed. I kept telling myself it had been nothing, just a coincidence. A moment. She didn't follow me, didn't call out, didn't chase me down the street asking where I'd been. And I hadn't turned around either. I just kept walking. But I kept seeing her. Not in person, at least not at first. She started showing up in the small, quiet places of my mind again. When I brewed coffee and let it sit too long. When I passed a bookstore and remembered the one afternoon we sat in her car, just reading side by side, not talking. When I lay in bed and saw the shape of her body curled under a blanket, breathing steady, completely unaware I was staring at her like I was trying to memorize her. Then, last night, I saw her again. Really saw her. There's a small gallery in the arts district that hosts these local showcases. I go sometimes, usually alone. It's quiet, full of muted conversation and strangers pretending not to feel too much. I like it. She was there. I turned the corner near the photography wall and found her standing a few feet away, staring at a black and white image of a single open window. The caption said, "Stillness." She didn't notice me right away. She was wearing dark jeans, a soft gray coat, simple flats. Nothing about her demanded attention, but everything about her held mine. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Lana, I said, too softly at first. She turned. And there it was again, that quiet recognition. Not shock, not awkwardness. Just this breathless pause between us, like neither of us wanted to be the first to fill it. Tyler, she said, barely above a whisper. We stood there, inches apart, surrounded by strangers and silence. I didn't expect. I started, then stopped. She smiled faintly. Neither did I. A pause. You look good, she said. So do you. And then we laughed, at how dumb and formal that sounded coming from people who once whispered to each other in the dark about dreams we never told anyone else. We walked through the gallery together. Didn't talk about what had happened. Didn't talk about who we were now. Just let the quiet be enough. She pointed to a painting and said it reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. I mentioned a sculpture that made me think of those early mornings when I used to find her in the backyard, barefoot, sipping coffee before the world was awake. She looked at me. Really looked. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. At the exit, we stood still. Neither of us reached for the door. I'm not married anymore, she said, like it had been sitting on the tip of her tongue all night. I nodded. I moved downtown. Got promoted last month. Her smile was gentle. I always knew you would. Another pause. I don't know what this means, I said. Neither do I. She didn't ask for my number. I didn't offer it. We just stood there, letting the moment hang between us, full and unfinished. When we finally walked out into the cool night air, we turned in opposite directions. No promises. No final words. Just that same ache in my chest. The one that never really left. So here I am, back in my apartment, writing this. I don't know what to do about this, but my heart is aching again.